Okay, welcome everybody to the first council meeting of the new year. Happy New Year to everyone. We will be moving through the agenda, which has been posted since I believe last Friday. For those of you who are looking to follow along and don't have it in front of you, I want to call this meeting to order at, I don't see a time, 1:02 p.m. please. Going to deliver a land acknowledgement statement next. We want to acknowledge that we are on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have cared for this territory for the benefit of future generations, and their stewardship throughout the ages is recognized. Okay, move on to fact that there is a supplementary agenda. I believe it went last night. It was posted on
by 2 o'clock yesterday.
By 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So there is a supplementary agenda. If you haven't seen it, it is on the government website, on our municipal website. I'm going to read before we get there, I'm going to read today's meeting.
Yep, you can read that, please.
Sorry, we're going to go. Sorry, I've got too many pieces of paper. I'm just trying to focus a bit here. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka Lakes website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, your voice, and your comments being recorded and posted online. Okay, next. I'm going to ask for any pecuniary interest, if anyone has any they want to disclose. Seeing none, I do. I'm going to recuse myself from any discussion and participation on item 6A2, which is a review of the council minutes from December the 14th. And the specific issue at hand is that my spouse is being appointed or has applied to be appointed to the library board. I'm going to step out and let the deputy mayor take that over for me while I'm out of the room. Last thing before we get going, the motions that we're going to read have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite the meeting. And in terms of voting, all members will physically raise their hand until I have confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded by the clerk, but this will not be considered a recorded vote. All right, now we're going to move on. Item number 4 on invited delegations. We did receive an email just in the last 20 minutes from Frank Jaglowitz, who was to delegate under 4A. He's unable to attend at today's meeting. He's unable to participate by phone or by Zoom. And so he has sent along his comments, basically is a summary of his delegation was sent along. I believe all on council got it. I may be mistaken. We're going to post that on the government portal as soon as we can after this meeting is over so that it becomes a matter of the public record. The second matter that I want to speak to, we have a second delegation, and that is Mr. Stephen Fahner as agent for one of the applicants on when we get later on down in the agenda. Penny Middleton and Byron or Elizabeth Wilfert have indicated a desire to speak to that matter. We also received last night a request to make a comment from a woman named Michelle Hanikainen, and so she will speak at that time as well. We've put that off until 2 o'clock because that's probably when we'll get to that point in the proceedings, and it'll make it a little more relevant, a little more timely. We have no other public comments to speak about, so we're going to move on to the consent agenda. And obviously, where we would normally be just approving this in one swoop, I'm going to have to pull the council minutes and have them approved separately because of my conflict. Does anyone else have any comments or issue they want to raise? Councilor Nishikawa?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just
getting my numbers and I look to the clerk, I would like to pull the discussion about the stoves on the community centers to broader that discussion.
We're gonna-
Do you want me to stay which one?
Yeah, we'll just get a specific reference. I've got to turn off my mic, which I do have up here.
Yeah.
So it's sorry,
It's the.
general fund under 2-14-12-22.
Yeah, it's item 2, that's correct.
You're still muted, Your Worship.
Nope.
There, okay.
All right, thank you very much. Here's what I propose to do. We're going to have one resolution to cover off those parts that don't need to be separately dealt with. We'll try to deal with those all at once, and then we'll move on to the next issue will be the approval of the council minutes. I will step out and go dark and let Councillor Mazan handle that in my stead. And then we'll come back and have a different debate and discussion about the matter that has been pulled at the request of Councillor Nishikawa. So I have a resolution in front of me, moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that the mayor and council adopt and enact the following minutes and recommendations contained in the January 17, 2023 consent agenda and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Number 1, the December 14, 2022 General and Finance Committee minutes and action items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Number 2 is the December 15th, 2022 Planning Committee minutes and action items 1 through 7. Anybody have any comment on or any questions about that or any comments on that motion? All right, then I'll call the question. All in favor? That certainly carries. Thank you very much. All right, so anybody opposed? I think it was unanimous. Nobody opposed. Thank you very much. Okay, is Susan going to stay where you are? Then I'll just go dark and I'll probably just get out of the way rather than figure it out.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Committee can hear me, or council, sorry, thank you. I've been asked to approve the council minutes. I do have a resolution in front of me that I will read. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth, be it resolved that the council adopt the following minutes contained in the January 17th, 2023 consent agenda and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. That being 1, December 14th, 2022 council minutes. All those in favor? That passes. Thank you. I will now hand the meeting back to the mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm back now. Let's deal with this issue that we pulled. And I'm going to ask, I think probably Councillor Nishikawa, you requested that this be taken out. So maybe you can help us understand your comments on it.
Thank you. Well, I would say it was a shock to members of Community in Ward A. I can't speak about the other wards, when in fact initiatives that certainly Walker's Point have taken to actually benefit the community. Again, remembering that Township Muskoka Lakes does not engage in social wellness really. But in fact, these volunteer groups doing a tremendous job at keeping people active, keeping people engaged in the darkest, dreariest months of winter. I don't believe that a lot of our conversation, I think some of us, I was certainly taken off guard when this came forward at our last meeting, that we were going to tell the communities that they couldn't use their stoves and have potluck dinners any longer. And certainly, we never discussed as a council that I recognized the mental health issues and the importance of these community gatherings. Sort of a comment to say, well, just go elsewhere. That doesn't settle well with people. And in fact, comments made back to me were, I guess this council doesn't trust us, even though we fundraised and we built the center, they don't trust us. It's like, how do I respond to that? Because in fact, I kind of felt that same way, the way that our reports are and everything else. And again, I'm very, very concerned that we are basically saying that, again, we cannot use the stove for warming items. I understand from the research that I did that this is about deep frying. This is about fires that could be caused if we were under a commercial use. But the reality is that's not how we use our community centers. And again, that lack of understanding of the importance of the use of our stoves in the sun. And again, if I just look at Walker's Point and their potluck dinners, some of those senior citizens that come out actually have their children drive up to get them to go there. That is their only outing in many cases that month. There's a lot of benefit, and our council should recognize that benefit. But in fact, there are other ways that you can use your oven that are not going to be fire hazards. And I think there's just been a misunderstanding of actually how the public uses our spaces and the importance. I would say at this time that we should have those stoves plugged back in. If they're concerned about deep frying, we can put other measurements in place, for instance, to tell people not to do that. But again, my experience is that I have never seen that happen. But I just feel that we should be looking at this closer and not just saying, stop, we're all in danger, in danger, in danger. That message is getting really, really sent down the wrong direction, in my opinion, because now we're telling the public that we don't trust you and your tax dollars. Because again, don't forget that it's these, and in many cases, these community centers were built prior to the township even taking them over. And still fundraising goes on for those community centers. But the wrong message is being sent, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And as always, thank you for advocating for your community. Appreciate that very much. I think there's probably a natural next step is to have the Fire Chief Ryan Morrell talk to us about how I will use the word charges, but I use that, not certain that that's the right word, how this situation, the order came up and what triggered this kind of a response, because I could use a refresher from last month. There he is.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. I can address the inspection order that was initially laid in March 9th, 2022. An inspector from our office looked at all of the township facilities, and in all those facilities, he came up with, I think it was 70 recommendations. So that order was delivered to Director Becking, and actually it wasn't delivered to Director Becking, it was delivered to the manager of the facilities in his stead on March the 10th in written form and an email. Pursuant to what we're talking about here with the stoves, I just want to talk about what's changed in terms of the way that the fire code was written in 1997 in terms of what approved means. So there has been 7 updates to the NFPA 96, which is the referred document for fire protection measures in a commercial cooking environment. And through each one of those updates, subsequently, they've addressed new safety concerns. And the way that we've looked at those kitchens previous has been that they were not being used to create grease-laden vapor or smoke, but we have subsequently found out that they actually are being used to make grease-laden vapor and smoke in a lot of the cooking that occurs in those spaces. And it was upon finding that out that that basically put the onus back on us in terms of the fire department of applying the code as it's the acceptable standard. So therefore, it's that's what we wrote in the order, the inspection order in March. Further to that, we gave council some time to address the issue, fully understanding that there is a budget that has to be placed. I cannot address the issue of when it was put before Mr. Becking and when he would bring it to council, but I can tell you at this point in time, the order has been delivered to the Public Works facilities on March the 9th, and here we stand today. The thing about the fire code is we always look for compliance. So if people are willing to comply with the code or move towards compliance, then we afford more time for that person to actually make compliance occur. So my hope is at this point that council will move towards compliance with the acceptable standard, which is what was defined in the order. And I empathize with what the councillor is suggesting in terms of how the community space is used. And I felt the same way when I would first address these parts of the code. But I can tell you that over time, we've learned a lot about fire safety and about fire safety usages of buildings. And with the infrequent users that are using this building, it is the safest measure to place commercial kitchen suppression systems in place for this building. It is the safest thing that we can do for our community. So that is why the order highlights that and asks that of council. Further in the act, I understand that most of the stoves have been taken offline, but they have not been yet removed. So we are not doing a final inspection until those stoves are actually removed. So as it stands right now, the order is that under section 30, it would be an offense to not comply with an inspection order under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. And that's where we're at right now. We're just waiting for the facilities department to confirm that they're actually removed from the areas where we identified them, and then we will close off the order.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions? I have one, but I'll see if anyone else has questions for Chief Morrell. Councilor Bosenworth?
Just for clarification, Chief Morrell, are these big gas industrial stoves or are these typical stove that you'd find in the house?
Great question. So they vary. Some of them are actually residential stoves, and NFPA 96 addressed those way back in the day. But really what it comes down to is when you have a commercial space, a shared space with an assembly occupancy attached to it, the risk factor is higher. You don't want to lose that building, let's put it that way. So you have to integrate safer measures. In some of the spaces, there are commercial stoves, but the commercial stoves don't maintain full compliance with NFPA 96. So it's varied. It's different across the board, but the only code reference that we can say is that they either meet or they do not meet NFPA 96.
Follow up, Councilor Bosenworth?
Just a quick one for clarification. So if you had a standard residential 4 hot plate stove in the building, it still has to comply because of the higher risk because it's a public community building. Is that correct?
That is correct, because the occupancy is
It's the occupancy.
It's about the occupancy, yes.
Councilor Roberts, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I did have an opportunity to talk to Fire Chief the other day about this. And Fire Chief, you were saying that we got past the whole grease issue to actual combustible smoke. I'll have a follow-up. Would you first explain to the committee what you relayed to me about that regulation.
Yeah, it might be more helpful for me to read the regulation as it stands in its entirety to the group. Just give me a quick sec here. I don't want to find the reference. So basically, the regulation is that if there is grease-laden vapor or smoke being created in the cooking process, that you shall meet the requirements of a commercial safety system that meets NFPA 96. So
Okay,
that would include toasters, or that would include anything that's going to create smoke or grease-laden vapor in that space.
Okay, well, thank you, because you and I did discuss the toasters, because I recall back in 2015, I was working for the Region of Peel in property manager. And the director of property management, the Region of Peel, put a order out that we were to remove all toasters from all buildings, and it was due because of a fire caused by a toaster in a hospital in Toronto. So it caused damage. So I've now, when I talked to fire chief, I reminded myself of that. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that we have had correspondence or documentation from the insurance companies, both the present and the past, and they saying we wouldn't be covered if for any loss if a fire occurred as a result of a toaster. I'm using that as a specific example, and then we can just go up from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nishikawa?
Thank you. There's a few things I heard from the chief. I would just say it confused me, because I've heard that if we can show that we're in compliance. So whatever that compliance, because there was a little bit of, compliance didn't necessarily mean one particular thing. So for instance, if I was just again to look at the use of an oven to warm food that is not being cooked there, it's actually being brought in, warmed. And quite frankly, there's people on the fire department that are attending these things. I don't see, I'm still, honestly, I can't get over the fact that we knew about this last March and this just came forward. That is just stopping my conversation so much. But I just feel that there's another way that we could be tackling this. We're not doing any, like our communities any favor by saying we're going to shut you down until, this all. So again, it's going to have to go in front of, it'll be months down the road. So the community more or less is not going to be able to use their community center. And that really, really concerns me. And I think that there's a creative way to look at this, that in fact, if people even sign documents and all of those types of things, because otherwise we're shutting down everything. If we were to say that the insurance is going to be this, this, and this, there will be nothing left in this township. And, for the public to do except to pay their taxes. And I can't stress enough that we just keep asking for stuff for them. Like we want money, but we don't want to give back. And that really concerns me.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, but I do have a question for Chief Morrell. I wanted a little clarification on something you said a minute ago. You said if there was meaningful progress towards compliance, I think was the language you used. I don't know what that means in March of last year, and I don't know what it means today, but is there something we can do to show meaningful, whatever that was, meaningful progress towards compliance? And if so, what would it take? Is it simply just acknowledging the problem and trying to resolving to fix it? Or is it more than that?
Through you, I would just preface what I'm going to say here. I have no control, being the chief fire official, over your insurance. So I think the predominant issue for council to consider is the fact that you could have an insurance obligation. That said, if council were to come forward, or not council, the township were to come forward with a plan to move towards compliance and a written plan that could be committed upon, and there would be timeframes within that that they could commit to, that they are going to move facilities towards compliance in the code. And the exact wording in the code I have in front of me now, it says a cooking operation producing smoke or grease-laden vapors shall be provided with an exhaust system and fire protection system in accordance with NFPA 96. Full stop. The next line is the line that we were allowing the cooking to occur over time, which is, despite sentence 1, an existing exhaust or fire protection system may be approved. Now, approved is defined as being approved by the chief fire official. That's myself. I can no longer approve what's going on in those spaces because we have found out that the cooking does create grease and it does create smoke of a significant quantity. So that's what changed, and that's what the order was based upon. And then subsequent to that, I know there was an investigation done by the department, and they discovered that there was no insurability for that space. Now, we could work with the township on which spaces could be brought back into line, but again, there would be a lot of provisions involved in that. Some of them would be training for all the people that are using the appliances, signage, disconnection of certain things like fryers and tabletops and things like that. But we would have to have a lengthy discussion with the township officials in order to ensure that we're not going to create smoke or grease-laden vapors in those spaces.
Okay, that's great. And we have a presentation from the Director of Public Works upcoming that I think talks about I know it talks about the proposal to sort of remediate, get ourselves back in business, at least in some of these centers. And I wasn't proposing to debate that now. I was just curious to know what meaningful progress would look like in your eyes, but it sounds like it's too late for that, frankly. It's a bigger issue than that now.
Yeah, through you, it would be very complicated at this point because there has been a lot of time afforded for actions to be taken. However, we are willing to look at things for certain centers if those centers should change some of the behaviors that we noted that were occurring prior. That said, at the end of the day, you will need to bring every one of those facilities that is cooking into compliance with NFPA 96.
Understood. And sorry, one last question. Is there one order or is there an order per community center?
Excellent question. Through you, there was an order per
Okay.
building, per address, and in those it was listed multiple contraventions. A lot of them were rectified almost immediately, but we note them just in case we find them again, just like we would with any commercial inspection.
Okay, that's fair. Councilor Nishikawa?
Thank you. Just to follow up from the answer to your last question. Can we see that information? Like, which community centers, or even which community centers were concerned about deep frying? Because I don't know that necessarily everything should be painted with the same brush, but I'm hearing that there was more dialogue, more other information shared, but I have not seen that information. And I actually think that, I think we should. I think the public deserves more information other than just being told danger, danger, because that's all that's coming across. And so this whole conversation, like maybe there's not a lot for Walker's Point to do. I have no clue, but if we didn't open this up, we just wouldn't get this information. And I don't think that that's what I am happy to do as a counselor. And when somebody comes to me, I hope that I can get as much information as possible to share with them, but I'm not feeling like I have it yet.
And that's fair. That's fair comment. Thank you, Councilor Nishikawa. And I guess basically back to Chief Morrell, in terms of putting out public information, even a copy of, are all the orders that, well, the orders are not all the same because they don't all detail the same infractions, right?
Yeah, through you, great question. So all orders are basically protection between the municipality and the person that's being served upon. So this would be something that we would take into closed session for council. It would not be something that I believe is freedom of information, but I think that would have to be determined through the clerk. But because it's a matter that could become a legal matter, I believe it is something that council would be allowed to see in closed session, and then we can describe each one of those orders. But I would leave that with the steward of the building, which would be the Director of Public Works.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? I see no hands. We have, I guess, and I don't want to be a broken record to some, oh, sorry, Councillor Bosenworth, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, I thought there was a slight window that Chief Morrell opened when he said we could take some interim actions that might extend our ability to be viewed as taking action to resolve the problem. Signage might be a simple example. That's, it says you can only use this facility for these 2 or 3 items that might be able to keep some of these kitchens open. So that's really my question to Chief Morrell.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. Yes, there are measures that we can take to help move you towards compliance. However, I'll reiterate that at the end of the day, each of the facilities should meet the NFPA 96, the intention of NFPA 96 for the exhaust portion. If there's going to be cooking happening in those facilities, that will create smoke or grease-laden vapor. But we can have that discussion with the Director of Public Works about which facilities and what requirements would look like. Some of those would be more than just a sign. They would be probably a waiver that would have to be signed by any of the users, and some sort of element of supervision that would occur from the Public Works Department to supervise what's happened after the cooking event has occurred. That stated, again, we would want to plan towards compliance.
And let me just tag on to that with 2 obvious things. We would, or certainly one obvious thing, we would be doing so at the township's risk, complete risk, financial risk, because presumably we would be doing it without the benefit of any insurance coverage. Okay. Anybody with another comment? All right, I'm going to read the resolution. Thank you. At the good one. Thank you. All right, I do have a resolution, and we're going to engage if we wish to discuss it. Moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that action item 2 from the December 14, 2022 General and Finance Committee meeting be enacted, and that staff be directed to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. And just to be 100% clear, this is an instruction to go ahead with the original resolution from last month to disable and remove, I hear now, the cooking equipment from each of the offended buildings.
You can screen share.
Councillor Edwards?
Yes, as far as I'm concerned, the stoves that are unplugged and the breakers are locked off are not a safety risk. And as far as that goes, the stoves could be stored there until further notice. I can't see a disconnected stove that's not connected that can cause a fire hazard, if I'm not wrong, and see what we can come up with. And I would also like us to check with our insurance companies. So some of those stoves, if they were just used for warming in the oven, are not producing grease or smoke, and that they're in the oven. And I'd like our insurance provider to check them before we start removing them all. Thank you.
Director Becking, they're your facilities. Do you have any comments on what Councillor Edwards just suggested?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Edwards' point is whether it complies with the NFPA or not is up to the fire chief. And I don't mean to try and shift direction, but the fire chief is responsible for the compliance with the NFPA. I will agree with Councillor Edwards that if it's unplugged and the breaker is thrown and locked out, technically speaking, it cannot be used. If it cannot be used, it doesn't produce the conditions that the code requires. But the final determination is entirely within the wheelhouse of the chief, and I will bow to whatever direction he gives in that regard.
Okay, thank you for that. Chief Morrell, you heard Councillor Edwards' suggestion. Is that going to be satisfactory to meet the conditions of your order?
Again, I would reiterate that if there's a plan by this body or the township to move towards compliance, that would aid me in allowing storage of those items in that space. However, that said, that is not the way that we would do business with other commercial kitchens in market. Okay. We would normally require them to remove that item from service. Should we attend for a fire to those locations, and that is the cause of the fire, or it is active, there will be compliance orders issued towards the people that are in charge of that appliance. That's neither here nor there. That needs to be stated at this point, because it would be considered possible negligence at that point that they weren't removed. So I just want to make sure that that's absolutely crystal clear.
Thank you, and it is. Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I just have to say this. I trust our taxpayers. I don't like this whole thing about, again, us shutting everything down, and we don't even talk about the sidewalks we don't properly maintain. And what if somebody falls there? I mean, there are so many issues that could be tackled under insurance and things. And this whole discussion has really concerned me that I don't know who's, quite frankly, we got two different departments. Information was shared really late in the game, as far as I'm concerned. But even if should have there been a committee to help out getting this information, and for instance, even having our whole boards engaged and saying, oh, you need signage, you need this, you need all of the things that the chief had mentioned, which to me was not a big issue, honestly. But I'm just hearing more reasons like, be afraid, everybody be afraid we're going to be sued. I'm willing to take that risk, honestly, because I've been around for 30 years and I haven't seen a fire hall on a community center on fire yet. And I have to also remember there's a fire hall right next door to the Walker's Point Community Center. There's a fire hall right next door at the Torrance Community Center. How can I ignore that? And how do you tell the taxpayers that it doesn't really matter that the fire hall's there and those firemen actually come to some of these things? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, other than that danger, danger. And that's all I'm hearing. And I don't believe that that's moving us forward in any way.
Okay, I see no other comments or questions. I have one comment, and then I'm going to call the vote. I think it would be wholly improper for us to hold ourselves to a reduced standard from that which we would hold our commercial restaurateurs and other constituents who operate equipment, any kind of equipment, and need to comply with the fire code. Number two, we have an order outstanding, and I think it's certainly as painful as it is. None of us, I'm sure every one of us have heard from members of the community, and none of us like to disappoint people. But we have an order outstanding against us, and I'm not going to vote to disregard that. Number three, I think it would be wholly improper for us to put the risk of loss of that structure or any of these structures on the taxpayer by not complying and by invalidating our insurance. And so from my perspective, we've exhausted the opportunity to find a way to fix this without interrupting the immediate service I don't see any alternative. And so from my perspective, acting for the best interests of all of our constituents, I will be voting against this. No, for this, right? This is in the positive, voting for this. If there's no other comment, I don't see any other hands up, then I will call the question. All in favor, please so indicate. All right.
6, 8.
And all opposed? Okay, thank you very much. That carries. Okay, thank you. All right, we've got a couple of comments, a couple of reports. Is it almost 2 o'clock, or are we ready to move over? I guess we'll handle these other two then.
Maybe 1.
We've got 2 reports from Director Becking. One relating to a retaining wall, and the second one, the issue of the community center kitchens. So Director Becking, there you are.
Thank you, Your Worship. My report is further to the verbal report that I gave to council at your December meeting. Since that time, we have had our consultants, Tatham Engineering, come in and review the report and give us an assessment of its condition. They have found the wall to be unstable and have recommended that actions be taken to make temporary protections for the sidewalk and for the road. Further to that, we have closed the sidewalk as we had indicated we had done on a temporary basis. It's now a semi-permanent closure. We have installed jersey barriers to prevent any further falling debris from going beyond the sidewalk and into the roadway. We have also attempted to scope out the project and to assess what we may be facing in terms of the replacement of the structure. The conclusion that the consultant has come to is that replacement of the structure is necessary. We have scoped the project by the generation of a couple of alternatives in a very conceptual way in order to examine what is the potential implications. Given the close proximity of the roadway, the sidewalk, and the building, which has been constructed very close to the property line, it is not going to be a very simple project. And quite frankly, it's going to be quite complicated. Based on a very preliminary examination of what may be required, we are facing a cost of somewhere between $800,000 and $1.3 million to replace that wall. And obviously, the actual cost will vary according to what the ultimate decision is of council. From a point of view of next steps, we need to get some geotechnical information. So that will entail boreholes into the ground to examine the subsurface conditions. And on the basis of that information, then to develop a design and contract documents necessary to affect the construction. In the meantime, the sidewalk will remain closed and the temporary measures will stay in place until we can move forward. The recommendation before you is that Tatham Engineering be awarded a sole source contract for the provision of geotechnical and design services for a new retaining wall system at an estimated amount of $63,000 with funds to be drawn from the roads reserve. With that, Your Worship, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Director Becking on the wall? Councillor Bosenworth.
Director Becking, what How much would the cost be reduced by if we close the sidewalk? And, is it viable to close the sidewalk?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. The challenge that we face in Port Carling is that it's a very old right-of-way and very narrow, and there is insufficient room for 2 lanes of traffic, pedestrian access, and parking. Elimination of the sidewalk, in my humble opinion, is not an appropriate thing to do because it will interrupt the flow of pedestrian traffic, number one. It will restrict access to the adjoining businesses, which will have an adverse impact on their bottom lines, quite frankly. It will also force pedestrians to cross 118 at a location, quite frankly, that is at best described as being poor. And so therefore, I would think that we would be putting people's safety at risk. So on the basis of that rationale, I would recommend against closure of the sidewalk. I would point out, however, that even if you do remove the sidewalk, you are still going to have to construct a retaining wall, albeit perhaps not to the same height and degree as is presently the case. But it will not be a zero cost either.
Thank you, Director Becking. Councilor Nishikawa, you're next.
Thank you. I'm just reminding myself, I believe that this went in 2009, maybe 2008, 2009. So my concerns are, first of all, would be reusing the material that is there. The price is quite shocking to me, honestly. And I also wonder, when we undertake these types of things, is it presented to council of the lifespan? So for instance, if council is going out and spending $1 million on something, will we get a report? In other things that I've been involved with, we would get a lifespan report. We would get what our expectations were. And in fact, knowing then that if something has a lifespan, and we would actually start putting money in towards those. Was that ever contemplated? Is there monies within the reserves that were specifically to this particular wall? Is really a much more detailed information that I want, that maybe it can't be provided today, but certainly having an understanding of when this all happened and the expectations out of it would be helpful, in my opinion. I was concerned when the wall first went up and the material, for instance, that was used, but it's there. I'm just not sure that I want to spend another $1 million on something that hasn't lasted at all, is in my opinion. But again, I'd also like to see some of these reports come forward that in fact it is recommended that we start putting money aside to repairs in 30 years, for instance, or whatever that time frame would be. Thank you.
I'm not sure there was a question there for Councilor Becking, was there? Or Councilor Becking, Director Becking.
Well, it was more, I do want to understand the history.
Okay.
And what was expected at that time. And I know it would have to go back to our community. And don't anybody ever forget that we did have a community improvement plan. We've had a community improvement plan for Port Carling and Bala for many, many years. And this was part of that plan. And so I just think that there's a little more details that current council should know about. And also, again, I'm a little concerned that we're going forward and not even discussing, or not having the ability to discuss what we might get and what we like. I am sure we'll get something back in a consultant's report, but I just wish we didn't have to pay so much money all the time for a consultant before we get any answers. So there is a question in there, and just mostly what information can be brought forward when this initial initially was built.
Go ahead, Director Becking.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think my understanding of the situation is that the councillor is correct. However, it's the lower wall that was replaced in 2009, or whenever the G7 meetings were held in Muskoka. My understanding is that the upper wall, there was an initial intention to replace the upper wall. And because of pushback from the then owner of the building adjacent, as well as other members of the community, a decision was taken to not replace the upper wall. I do not know when the upper wall was installed, but I am left with the impression that it has been there for quite some time, much longer than the lower wall. As it relates to the councillor's desire to see some kind of report, the report, the consultant has identified a number of significant issues that will have to be overcome from a technical perspective. We need to give the consultant an opportunity to do precisely that, work through the various issues that are going to be faced by us, and come up with technical solutions that are going to be constructible. I'm anticipating that at some point through the design process, as they approach the middle to end of the preliminary design process, that a report will come back to this chamber for your consideration, giving you at least one and hopefully two practical alternatives from which you can then choose, being fully aware of what the implications associated with each of those alternatives are. So that is the councillor's request is inherent within the request that is before you. The final comment I'll make is that the councillor, I think, is hit the nail on the head, quite frankly, when we think in terms of asset management. Asset management is knowing well in advance what's coming down the tunnel at you, and giving you having the financial plan in place so that when these things need to be replaced, the funds are available. So to that end, and as council is aware, we are working towards that very goal. So with that, Your Worship, I'll.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I was looking at the actual report, and the stacked stone retaining wall, it's 718,000. I would suggest that the cast in place concrete wall would be better, simply for the fact that if there's any erosion of that building, we could have some liability if it starts to crumple due to that wall. And if the report was right, saying the wall's starting to bulge out, there should be something that ties it back in. So if you're just looking at dollar cents, it looks like a cheap fix, but I think the retaining wall at more would be to our benefit. And would CCT tell us how long they would estimate that would last?
Thank you for that. I think we're probably going to have several kicks at this. We're going to have an engineering firm have a look and come up with the recommendations. So certainly when that comes back, we'll have lots of time to discuss what they've come up with. Councillor Kent.
Thank you. And to Director Becking, quick question for you. I can't visualize exactly where this is. I'm trying to, but can you just tell me how long this wall is? Because I'm looking at the plans and I can't make heads or tail of them due to probably inexperience.
Director Becking, go ahead.
Firstly, you're not alone, Councillor, and Engineers typically talk in hieroglyphics, so for that I apologize. The wall is approximately about 30 to 40 meters long. It's directly across from the LCBO in town. And it's directly below the Pie Pizza Restaurant, which is in the old building that's up on top of the escarpment. If that helps you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, and I've seen none, I'll read the resolution and get it on the table on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that Tatham Engineering Ltd. Be awarded a sole source contract for the provision of geotechnical and design work for a new retaining wall system located in front of 114 Medora Street in Port Carling in the amount of $63,000 with funds to be drawn from the roads reserve. And that the Director of Public Works be authorized to execute all documents to carry out the work. Any other questions, any comments? Councillor Bosenworth.
It's a very large amount of money. I was just looking on Google Earth. It's actually quite a long wall. I thought it was fairly short, but it's a long wall. And I was wondering if the engineering consulting firm could assess how much of that wall is actually in danger. There's only a very small portion of it that has tumbled down from when I saw it last time. And yet I think the proposal will be to replace the whole wall. And, you know, the sticker shock, I think, is quite a bit for all of us. And if the vast majority of if it happened to be that the vast majority of the wall has quite a long remaining life, that possibly should be consideration by the engineer. And I guess I have a question. Will they automatically look at that, or are we just telling them to replace the whole wall?
Director Becking.
Thank you, Your Worship. That question has already been looked at, and they have come to the conclusion that the wall is destabilized almost along its full length, and that replacement is the only option. You cannot replace that wall segmentally. In addition to that, you can't replace that wall segmentally because of the nature of the construction.
Thank you for that. Oh, Councillor Kent, your hand is up.
Just one more quick one. Are they looking at any other alternatives? And I'm not a geotechnical engineer. I've been through this on my own property recently, but there, you know, helical piles, other ways of going at this that are less onerous than putting in a wall. And they may not be practical here, but I would hope that they would be creative enough to look at newfound techniques rather than just a big clunky heavy wall, which is very expensive.
Your Worship, they will examine the range of practical alternatives. They looked at the two obvious ones, all things considered, but they will make sure that they at least consider other options. That having been said, I would say that a wall is going to be required. It's just going to be a question of what configuration it's in.
Councillor Edwards. You're muted, Alan.
Thank you. Also, when they come up with their report, give a lifespan, because the concrete will have a longer lifespan than the stacked stone, and that, so the council can make an informed decision. Thank you.
We will do so.
Thank you. I have just one quick thing, just so that we can cover it off, and I can't remember if it's in your report. I don't have it in front of me, or if you and I spoke about it, but where does the responsibility for the district, since this is in part, I would think, on the district road allowance, fall to cover pick up the cost?
An excellent question, Your Worship, and unfortunately, I have to say that we are the owners. the wall is required because of the sidewalk. It's not because required as part of the roadway. Under the Public Transportation Highway Improvement Act and the Municipal Act, while it is the district's road allowance, we have the right to be in that road allowance for pedestrian purposes. That having been said, we bear the full cost associated with those works. So, and I have already, I think as I reported to council in December, I had already had conversations with the district and confirmed that that was in fact the case.
Okay, no further questions. I've already read the resolution. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of moving forward with this resolution? Raise your hand, please. Anyone opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. All right. We'll squeeze one more in here with Councillor Becking. It'll be an easy one. It's the community center kitchen. Director Becking, do you want to take us through your second report, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll kind of skip over most of the background because I'm sure we're all painfully aware of it. We have 16 kitchens in 12 community centers. They are considered 12 primaries, so one main kitchen per facility. And in the case of 4 of the community centers, we have a secondary kitchen, typically in the basement or lower level of the community center. As you're aware, the fire chief conducted a review of all township facilities in the early spring. And we were issued something like 77, 78 odd directives. Of those directives, 10 related to the kitchens in the community centers. You directed that I could give you a report to indicate the options that are available to us. In my report, I've outlined 3 options based on use characteristics as well as the designation of the facility as a hub location. We can proceed to upgrade the kitchen at the Walker's Point Community Center. It's the most active of the kitchens, and it will entail replacing the range with a commercial grade range, upgrades to the existing exhaust system, and installation of a wet certified fire suppression system, and the exhausting equipment. And the report lays out what the cost of that. The second option would be to address not only the condition in Walker's Point, but expands it to include also Windermere. Windermere is a centrally located facility in the northern portion of the township. Unlike the other areas of the township where there is a clear hub location, as defined in the Parks and Rec master plan, the north end does not have an obvious hub location. Windermere would be the closest central location that could be readily upgraded. And you may wish to consider doing those 2, and that will address the bulk of the locations where the kitchens are used on a regular basis. The third option is to upgrade all of the kitchens and bring them back into compliance with the fire code. And those options are all laid out. Now, members of council will no doubt notice that I have raised the issue of the fact that there is no hub, designated hub location in the north end of the township. That issue was observed when we went through the Parks and Rec master plan. It noted that there was no obvious hub location and identified that there should be one identified so that council can invest in that location into the longer term. This may be an opportunity for council to do precisely that. And to that end, I've included in the report the possibility that you may wish to proceed with a feasibility study with a view to developing a long-term strategy for the north end of the township. The recommendation speaks to moving forward with that. The timing of doing so is entirely at your discretion. You can choose to proceed or not proceed as you wish. But it is intended to address the very issue that the consultant was concerned about, which is that you will be placed in a position of having to make decisions about and making investments into a multiplicity of facilities, not all of which will produce value for money in the longer term. With that, Your Worship, I'm sure there are lots of questions, so I'd be happy to try and answer them for members of council.
Thank you, Director Becking. Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Through you to, I'm not quite sure. I'm a little concerned that what we thought was a report that was going to be about the stoves in the community centers got changed quite a bit. About hiring a consultant, about a new hub, a much longer term planning discussion that in fact should have been at general finance. I'm very concerned that this type of thing came directly to council. I thought we were going to have a conversation about getting those stoves up and running again, and it really feels like the conversation got changed very quickly to building the hub. I would request that those conversations get moved back to a committee level, and in fact, to our budget discussions, because certainly Gord Roberts and I have done a lot of work on some of these items, and are prepared to discuss them, but under budget deliberations. Again, I'm not in favor of just hiring a consultant because we just said it at a particular meeting without full discussion about what we're expecting to get out of it. But we have a lot of that information currently, and I would like to just deal with the stoves today.
That's fair. Councilor Roberts, your hand was up. I don't see it now.
Thank you, Chair. I did lower it because Councilor Nishikawa brought up my concerns. I did go back and take a look at the June resolution from General Finance for the Recreation, Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Had 111 recommendations in there. The resolution actually stated 2 actions that council needs to take, and the hub was in, or the 141 consideration was part of 111 recommendations, but not deemed to be an urgent thing in the report. So I support that we should just deal with the stoves, and then during budget time, it'd be a really good opportunity, which will on the recreation master plan on the pieces that we're going to do in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. Option 1, you've got 40,050. What is the feasibility study? Is it 40 or 50,000?
Your Worship, the feasibility study was very loosely scoped at about $50,000.
I would just as soon put it into stoves because the people want their community centers that they have at this point. The consultants obviously weren't listening to what the community wanted. And that, as Councilor Nishikawa had said, They were their community centers for years. They were turned over to the township. They were supposed to be kept open, and they're happy with what they have. And if you look at Bracebridge spending 75 million on upgrading theirs, the people aren't asking for that. They just like to have a stove so they can cook on when they have their dinners. It's as simple as that. So I would say if we have to, I could go with Walker's Point. And that I don't want the feasibility study. That can go in at the budget debates for next year's budget. But I would not spend $50,000 to study something that people haven't been asking for.
Okay. Anyone with any other questions? We've got a resolution to read. I guess we've sort of narrowed it down.
So they're looking at option one.
Looking at option one, is that the resolution that we're going to focus on? Does anybody have any questions on that? Councillor Mazin?
Thank you. And through you, I was waiting because I thought we were asking for questions on the actual report. So I was just waiting to kind of add in my thoughts here. I would agree with my colleagues who have just spoken that perhaps the timing seems off for the addition of the feasibility study. I think staff noted that it was a big part, or not a big part, it was a part of our conversation as recreation as its whole. But our group had come together with two primary recommendations as it contemplated the upcoming budget. So I don't know if we're doing an a la carte system, but maybe it is put on there so it continues as a conversation point. But I would support possibly the option two, which is what I think I'm hearing from my colleagues, which is the Walker's Point kitchen and Windermere. And the reason I would support that is at this point, the Raymond Hall, which is the one that in the north section actually has a functioning kitchen, is actually closed for business while it gets its repairs on its washroom. So at a peak time, perhaps of use, in the north section right now, we do not have an operating stove. So I don't know if that helps. I think I've entered into the debate part of this prior to you reading a resolution. But I do think that perhaps option two is the appropriate next step.
Well, and thank you for that. Your timing is fine because there's three options here, and I need to figure out which one generally we want to read.
So then that would have been my opinion, is that option two seems like a good option.
So just as a straw poll, is it option two that we should be focusing on right now? I only see one other person. 2, 3. How many do you see? Yeah, okay. That anybody think not option two? Okay. Councillor Nishikawa, I'm going to go to you. You have a comment or a question? Oh yeah, actually, now that we've narrowed it down, let me read the resolution. At least we'll know what we're debating. Moved by Councillor Mazin, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that council identify the preferred options for upgrading the non-compliant community center kitchens and authorize inclusion of the appropriate funding in 2023 capital budget. And I have put a check mark beside option 2. Councillor Burry, you're ranked ahead. You bumped into first place somehow there. I don't know. Go ahead.
Because I was first place.
Okay. All right.
So I strongly support forgetting the feasibility study for now. I think we've got a much larger thing to look at within recreation and where we go as a township over the longer period. I'm going to support option 2 for the reasons that Councillor Mazin said, that Raymond, really important, but it's out of commission until we can fix the toilets and all of that. So let's get Windermere, let's get Walker's, show that we're doing the kinds of things that our constituents want us to do. Take a deep breath and look at the overall recreation portfolio, which is going to include trails and potentially an arena and some other things. And so instead of doing this, with Band-Aids and binder twine each time, taking a step back. I think option 2 buys us a little bit of time so that we can take a step back, take a deep breath, and really come to the table with what does the township look like in 5 years and 10 years, not next week. Like, I'm tired of looking at next week.
Okay, Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I guess my concern was going to be that in trying to read through things, that I didn't want any lines in item 2 to relate to anything else but the stove. So I was really making sure that that was there. But I also have concerns of what that looks like, of the selection. So as I read things through, things I have to might get moved around. I hope this doesn't become a make work project at all, that we're not redesigning kitchens. There's so many, I'm a little concerned about some of the things that in fact we take on a project and we've created, months and months of a project. And I just don't know that that's necessary, but I want to express my concern that the information isn't really available for the public to tell from this meeting today of what they may or may not get. But I really don't hope that we're going to start rebuilding kitchens, because in the case of Walker's Point, a lot of that stuff was already redone and it's quite usable. So thank you.
Thank you very much. No other questions or comments. My only thought on this, and I think Councilor Nishikawa raised the issue of studies and plans. I mean, one of the realities here is if we rush ahead replacing stuff and then get to the point where we start to put into place some of the stuff in the Parks and Trails Master Plan, we may say, why did we spend that money 3 years ago, 2 years ago, only to decommission it later on? And I think that's a valid way to look at this. It'll keep us from being the second most indebted municipality in Ontario. Okay, I've read the resolution. I don't see any more questions or comments, so I will call the question. All in favor? And anyone opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Bosenworth. No.
No, I don't know how it went up.
That's the first time you've used the electronic hand, and it worked late, but it worked. Okay, I assume we have our delegates on hold. So should we move to that issue first? 4 point, what is it, 2? No. It's not that at all. Where the heck am I?
9B4.
9B4. And we will invite them into the main show here. Perfect. And I'll just speak to them one at a time. Is that it? Okay. I hear binging. There we go. I see a few are in here. This is great. Thank you. Welcome, all of you. And sorry, we're running about 20 minutes behind the original schedule. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Fahner. Welcome. Happy New Year. And your name is entered first, so you get the you got the floor for 5 minutes, right? No. Yeah.
Happy New Year to Mayor Kelley and members of council. Steve Fahner, Northern Vision Planning Limited, 109 Meadow Heights Drive, Bracebridge, Ontario, P1L 1A4. I'm here representing Sean Hickey today, and regarding a boathouse that is slightly over the width that is required in the bylaw. The proposed width is looking at 44 feet, where 38 feet is roughly 38 feet is permitted. So again, we are going slightly over width. It is on existing docks. It is single story with a peaked roof. We did hear from an objector at the public meeting. That was Elizabeth Wilfert. They are to the west. The setback on the west side of this proposed boathouse is over 160 feet, so it's a considerable setback. I am going to speak to her concerns in just a moment. The staff did support the application, so I'd like to thank staff for that. They did do a site visit and they did support the application. The side yard setback to the east is not changing. This is where we are closest to the projected side lot line, so it is not changing. I would point out that the bylaw currently goes out into the lake 30 feet. It could be extended another 20 feet at this setback. However, we have chosen to go entirely to the west, which is to cover an existing slip. I would also note too, as I mentioned, it's peaked roof, so we're not talking about a rooftop sun deck. It is low profile, and it's certainly consistent with other boathouses in the area. There are single slip and two slip single-story boathouses in the area. The increase in width, when you're out on the lake looking at it, I think is going to be largely imperceptible. You might notice a slight difference, but it really only is I think it's about a 12 or 13% increase overall in the width of the boathouse itself. And the overall lot coverage is only going to be 6.04%. The purpose of the increase in size is there are a number of canoes on the property. I had photos of that and kayaks. I do know that there was concern about use of the interior space, and that's becoming an issue, certainly in the municipality. Sean has not indicated to me any use of that type. However, practically speaking, I look at it and I think, let's say the canoes are out of there. Some people may choose to use the interior space at some point in time. I did provide, as usual, an extensive planning justification report that shows that it does, in my opinion, conform to the official plan. I went through the various policies and the various criteria. One thing you must consider is the impact of this and potential impact. And you don't look at the impact of whether there's a boathouse there or not, because there currently is one. The impact is whether the increase, or what the impact is of the increased width over what is normally permitted. What is that impact? And in my opinion, it would be fairly negligible. In terms of the neighbors' concerns, Mrs. Wilfert did indicate that there's noise concerns. I do sympathize with that, as I indicated at the public meeting. It's sort of unfortunate in a way that zoning bylaws cannot zone people or zone their behavior. You just, you hope that the neighbors get along and that use of each property is reasonable and respectful of each other. That unfortunately cannot be controlled through zoning bylaw amendment. There are other neighbors that are on today that were not for the public meeting, so I'm just going to request that I can address their concerns as they come up. So anyway, those are my comments. Again, staff supported the application. I think it's quite reasonable. I think you're going to find with some experience, you're going to be seeing applications that are way more far-fetched than this one, quite frankly. So those are my comments, and I'm here to answer any questions and make comments on any new submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fahner. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Fahner at this point? Seeing none, then I'm going to turn to Ms. Middleton, Penny Middleton. You're there. I see you're ready to go.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mayor Kelley and the councilors for letting me speak this afternoon. I was unable to attend the previous meeting as I had some dental surgery, so I don't have much to say today other than just to add on a couple of things in support of Ms. Wilfert. I don't oppose the extension over to the additional slip that is open presently, but I do oppose the additional approximately 1 foot, 6.1 feet. The drawing rendering makes it appear that it could be like a porch type setting. And you're right, the bylaws do not dictate what happens, but I think it might be conducive to some additional noise and partying that his immediate neighbors have been experiencing for several years. So that's, one of the reasons why we'd like for Mr. Hickey to adhere to the bylaws that are presently in place. I am next door to Mr. Hickey on the east side. We've been pretty good neighbors since he purchased the property. We've talked, walk talked, and exchanged pleasantries from time to time. I have informed him via text with regards to the safety of his property after numerous storms, and he seems to have appreciated that information. And I'm puzzled, continue to be puzzled why he has not approached us to discuss his past applications, to discuss this positively and to give us some insight as to, what's happening. I think it would have paved the way for better communication. So just in closing, I do oppose that small addition. I am very concerned about safety of his family and the partying. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody have any questions of Ms. Middleton while she's here? Seeing none, we're going to move on to Ms. Elizabeth Wilfert. I see you're here as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. And good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, Elizabeth Sleeth Wilfert, and my brother Lawrence Sleeth, co-owners of the neighboring property 1170 Woodruff Road, Foots Bay, Ontario, P0C1H0. I support the Muskoka Lakes Township's bylaws regarding the percentage of the lot frontage in relationship to the size of the permitted boathouse to be built. This is the second time since September that the Hickeys are asking for the bylaws to be amended. Much time and effort went into creating the bylaws for the rights of all the residents and taxpayers of Muskoka Lakes Township. Having served as a councillor of City of Richmond Hill and on the planning committee, I'm well aware of the time, effort, and research in preparing such property bylaws, and don't think we should be amending them at every turn of the road to the benefit of one person while the neighbors are clearly impacted. I'm not here to oppose the double slip boathouse to be built. I'm here to oppose the additional 6 feet that requires the bylaw to be amended on it to create what I consider an all-weather party room. Muskoka bylaw 3.5.2, use of accessory buildings, states that a habitable room is not permitted. Muskoka boathouse bylaw 4.3.5, structures over the water, part B and subsection VI, states that a boathouse shall not contain a dwelling unit. I consider a fridge, a sound system for music and chairs constitutes a habitable room, thus an all-weather party room. Clearly, the addition of the 6 feet, and if you look at the drawing with the glass garage doors, the intention is a party room. If you add 6 feet to a closet, it becomes a room. I realize that noise is not considered as a planning issue, but what is added will clearly increase the noise level that I, my brother, and my neighbors must suffer with. It also extends the hours of that excessive noise. I have been driven off my dock by the sheer volume of noise, and even in my cottage with the windows and doors shut, the noise is still unbearable. The neighbors and I should not have to live with this, and extending the Hickey boathouse an additional 6 feet beyond the bylaw is not acceptable, as the noise will continue regardless of the weather and the amount of light. The property has speakers on the boathouse blaring, and the family and their guests shout over the noise, which includes swearing. And often there are very young children in the neighboring cottages. The boathouse contains one or more fridges where the alcohol appears to be very accessible. And the fact I have witnessed when the family is not home, folks in boats come over, help themselves to the beer, and drive off in their boats drinking. There is usually a conversation on the dock, which I can clearly hear, which states that they will be going and drinking Hickey's beer. According to Mr. Fahner, At the planning meeting last month, the additional space was needed strictly for storage of their 2 kayaks, 2 paddle boards, and a canoe. I'm quite confident that those items are stored now over the winter in their current 1 slip. We have a 1 slip boathouse and over the years have stored at all the same time a sailboat, a sailfish, a canoe, a rowboat, a fisherman boat, 2 kayaks, and a sea-doo. I would be happy to offer my spatial organization skills to the Hickeys if they wish. My bedroom at the cottage from mid-September to July each year stores a multitude of life jackets, paddles, oars, outdoor garden furniture. Is this to be considered a storage room?
Ms. Wilfert, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, I'm just about done. Thank you. The additional space that is being requested is clearly a space to extend their parties to all hours and weather. I do not object, pardon me, to people enjoying themselves. It's the volume of noise and the constant hours that infringes upon everybody's rights to enjoy themselves. The Hickeys have been aware of the noise, and when asked to make it lower, they make it louder. Mr. Mayor and members of council, I sincerely request that you consider the rights of all taxpayers and respect the time, effort, and consideration that went into the making of these bylaws by the Muskoka Lakes Planning Department and the councils of 2017 and 2019, and uphold them. If my neighbors and myself can live within the bylaws, why can't others? Please do not approve this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone with questions? Mr. Rosenworth. Councilor Rosenworth, sorry.
I tend to agree with you that this looks like a party room in the making. Would your concerns be reduced if the application did not have a rolling glass door, instead a solid wall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we're going to move on to our last comments from Ms. Michelle Honeykanen. Is that right?
Perfect pronunciation.
Stayed up all night rehearsing. Now you only have 2 minutes because of the late registration of your name, but please go ahead. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor Kelley and members of council. I am one of the co-owners of 1174 Woodruff Road, along with my brother Michael. I'm in support of the current Muskoka Lakes bylaws. When our dock and boathouse needed to be rebuilt after it was damaged beyond repair from ice, the bylaws, we had to follow the bylaws rules. But now for the second time, we're back here with Sean and Helen Hickey asking for a change to that. I did not have an opportunity to attend the December meeting, but the recording Mr. Fahner had referred to our boathouse as being similar to the new proposed one. Yeah, we definitely have 2 boathouse slips, but we don't have any exterior indoor space on that side dock. According to Mr. Fahner, Mr. Hickey was apparently looking for extra storage for his stuff. We have absolutely no problem storing in our 2 slip boat, a canoe, paddle boards, a big floaty mat, stacked extra lawn chairs, and at least a dozen of my nephew's floaties in ours. At the November council meeting, the outgoing mayor commented about Sean wanting to be a good neighbor and steward of the environment. However, he never, approached us about any of these plans. And, I've had a fairly positive relationship and interactions with him over the years. So I was surprised to find pink slips on posts, and that's how I was finding out things. I've absolutely no issues with that second slip being closed in for the jet skis or sea-doos that they have, but I'm in opposition of the extra space. I've given them the benefit of the doubt over the years, but the noise is definitely an issue. And I suspect that this extra space is going to allow for entertaining, as many of the pleasantries that I have with them, have always talked about how much entertaining they love to do. So it's definitely concerning. It's concerning when the younger generation have their drunken parties and people showing up on personal watercrafts and boats. I have a very young nephew who notices these parties and comments on them the last few years. I'm often telling him that this is not okay. Can't be drinking and boating. And that's definitely just going to continue, I think, if this party room goes in. I'm totally in favor of people being able to enjoy themselves. I want to enjoy myself, my neighbors, but just being, cognizant of others in the neighborhood. And I feel like this proposal as it is to change the bylaw for this boathouse is going to impact that. So thank you for considering this and your time today. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for keeping it to 2 minutes. Appreciate that. Anybody have any questions before we move on to the discussion?
Mr. Fahner may want to do that.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Fahner in just 1 second. I see Councillor Kent, your hand is up.
I just wanted to, per the planning meeting in December, I fully support the comment by Councillor Bosenworth. I would be much more comfortable with the approval for the extra slip and the extra 6 feet if all of the outside walls, apart from the door entryway, were solid. I had the same exact comment back in December. I think that the 6 feet is not a big deal. That's a minor variance. But I think the fact that it's all glass sets it up in such a way that it anticipates clearly a party room, not a storage area. So I don't know if that practically, process-wise, how we can manage that, but I wanted to just reiterate that I, again, support Councillor Bosenworth on this.
Thank you. Okay, so all 4 guests, we're going to leave you in here so that you can listen to the debate and hear the outcome, I think. But I would just remind you that you've had your time, and I'm going to ask you to respect the council doing its job and keep yourself on mute if good. Mr. Fahner, do you have anything you want to dispute from the comments that came subsequent to you? Or not dispute, refute?
Thank you. I wasn't going to dispute any of the comments. No, I think they're worthwhile comments. I think a few points that need to be considered. Again, the boathouse can be extended out. There can be other ways to add to this boathouse, and I think the proposal is fairly reasonable to go towards the westerly lot line where there's the greatest setback. I think one thing that you must consider, though, is that through zoning bylaw process, and it seems to me from what I've heard, there's really little objection to covering the slip. And the thing is, if you cover that slip that's open right now and go midway to the dock that's currently there, which is quite reasonable for obviously stability purposes, we're really only going another 2 or 3 feet wider than that, than the middle of the dock that's there. The other thing is too, is that through the zoning bylaw, it's certainly been my experience, you can't control whether that's a wall around the boathouse. You can't control whether that's a door. You can't control whether it's a window. Mr. Hickey, we could have brought in an application that showed all walls. We could have shown a full slip that went front to back. And then through the building permit stage, then had done doors at that particular stage and only done a half slip. Like, he's been honest and very transparent about what he wants to build on this property. We could have brought something forward that would have been more appealing to people and more plausible. And I know that you can't control whether that's a wall, a door, or a window that is along the side, as long as you comply with the Ontario Building Code. You can have any one of those on the side of your boathouse or side of your dwelling, whatever you wish, as long as you comply with the Ontario Building Code. So I give credit to Mr. Hickey that at least he's shown exactly what he'd like to do with this boathouse. And this is not a case of smoke and mirrors. Anyway, so those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask, oh, sorry, we got Councillor Nishikawa now raised her hand.
Sorry, I may have jumped the gun if you were going to read the resolution. But I would say that I had raised concerns during planning on this and felt that it could be considered more of a minor variance and things. But I'm after listening to Mr. Fahner and some other conversations, it's concerning to me. And in fact, the same building was put in a different location on Lake Muskoka, and we really learned this summer, and it was interesting because all of these neighbors get along really well, but it became a big party central on the water. And, you know, those neighbors never expected that and it was a learning curve for that owner as well. But I would say that opening up that space and having it all glass is an invitation, and I'm not prepared to vote for that invitation today. You know, I used way back when we used to have 33 feet is what the inside of a boathouse should needed in order to navigate, and that was based on certain boat sizes on single slip boathouses. Clearly to me now that this boathouse is going to be used in a different manner than what I intend boathouses to be used for. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to have staff make a submission. I actually don't know who's on this. Oh, it's not even in the room. I'm looking. Oh, there we are. Ms. Crowder, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor Kelley. In December, Planning Committee heard zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 3822 ML, bylaw 2022-144 in the name of Hickey. The subject property is known municipally as 1166 Woodruff Road. The purpose of zoning bylaw 2022-144 is to provide an exemption from the maximum permitted cumulative single-story boathouse width to construct a single-story boathouse addition. The maximum permitted cumulative boathouse width is 37.9 feet. The cumulative width of the proposed single-story boathouse is 44 feet. In December, Planning Committee recommended the approval of the application to Council. No new submissions were received after the December Planning Committee meeting. I have no further comments, but would be happy to assist Council with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Anyone have any questions for Ms. Crowder? Councillor Bosenworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like Ms. Crowder to either agree with or refute Mr. Fahner's position on the glass door being able to be modified during the building process.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Kelley. Building materials are not something that we can control through the zoning bylaw process. Building materials are controlled through the Ontario Building Code.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bosenworth, you have a follow-up?
Thank you. I'm not quite sure what that meant. Does building material include glass sliding doors versus solid wood?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kelley, to Councillor Bosenworth. Yes. So essentially, we cannot stipulate what that wall could be constructed of, provided it complies with the Ontario Building Code.
Any further question, Mr. Bosenworth, Councillor Bosenworth? Go ahead. One last one.
Yeah, sorry for taking 3 times. So that means there would be no point in trying to put a condition in that wall had to be wood, because it could just be negated by the higher level Ontario Building Code. I think that's the conclusion.
Through you, Mayor Kelley, that would be correct.
Thank you both. Councillor Roberts, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you to staff, probably specifically Mr. Kennedy. And the question I have is that I understand that we cannot manage behavior through the Planning Act. What can the bylaw office do to ensure that this specific property adheres to our other bylaws?
Mr. Kennedy?
Through you, there's no real proactive way of doing this. We have to, in this sense, it's kind of a reactive situation. We can't assume that there's going to be a violation. You know, there's been a lot of conversation going back and forth here of what could happen, and that's just not something that we can, you know, send a caution letter out to say that, hey, this might happen. Make sure that you know, residents are supposed to know what the bylaws are and supposed to adhere by the bylaws. And then if they do contravene them and we receive a complaint, or we do see it proactively in some situations, then we deal with it. But this isn't a situation where we can, you know, proactively or preemptively, I guess is the better word, send a letter out to say that you can't do this or you can't do that.
Thank you. Supplemental.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, could you remind the attendees of this meeting and maybe Mr. Hickey exactly what the neighbors can do to raise a concern with a bylaw infraction?
Yeah, through the chair, we always do heavily try to use the report a concern button on the website. It is in the top right-hand corner, right on the home page. And then you just it's a fillable form right on the website that will go right to the our bylaw specific email. Alternatively, they can email myself or Officer Miners at our email addresses, which are available on the website as well, and call our office at the regular office number to report it. If it is happening, at midnight, we still encourage people to call. Unfortunately, yes, we are not here, but we can always deal with stuff after the fact. That's where those educational letters and caution letters would come from. And that's realistically how noise type of complaints would typically happen.
And thank you. I'm just going to add to that. I suspect, Mr. Kennedy, that if there's drinking and boating going on, it's even more aggressive response would be taken by the witnesses.
Well, yeah, through the chair, that's not a bylaw issue. That's an OPP issue. So if it is witnessed that there is open alcohol on vessels, I do strongly encourage every resident that does see that to report it to the OPP, and hopefully you guys, if it is reported, can get the necessary information to them so they can track down the culprit.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Councillor Burry.
Thank you, Your Worship. My more a comment and an observation. I think that we may have a bad actor here, and that is something that it happens. So what I'd like to see us do is maybe decouple. There's the planning issue, and we should look at planning. What I think is being raised and appropriately is that within the township, we have bylaws that have not been enforced, both noise bylaws and disturbing the peace, but also main floor habitated space. And I'm going to come back and I don't know how we do this, but we need to direct staff to look for some guidance from both the district and the province on what should we be enforcing. We know what the bylaws are, and it depends on whether you own the land underneath, whether you lease the land underneath, whether you're a one-story boathouse or a two-story boathouse. In this case, it's a one-story boathouse, and they don't own the property underneath, and they don't lease it. So therefore, there is no habitable space allowed. The boathouse is to be used for storage. So what do we do when Rob and team get called by the neighbors to say there's a bylaw infraction here because we haven't done anything as a township for a very long time with that? So I think in this particular case, Your Worship, I'd like to see a decoupling of the planning and the planning application, and the much bigger issue that we may be penalizing Mr. Hickey on as being the first of a parade of bad actors that do not know how to get along with neighbors. And I may be a little harsh here, but I do think we have an issue within our township of what bylaws we're enforcing and when we're enforcing them. I can tell you from my boathouse, I can see 7 boathouses that have kitchens on the main floor. None enforced. Where's the building department? How are they getting sign-offs? These are the kinds of questions, but I don't know that it's appropriate for us to be penalizing Mr. Hickey in this case until he does do something that contravenes the bylaw.
I think that's fair comment. I'm going to recognize Director Pink, who has joined us. David, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify some background information, particularly for those new council members, I think it might be helpful. The departments have only recently amalgamated, and I've only recently been in charge of bylaw enforcement, but I do believe the entire time I've been at the township, we have enforced the bylaws. There may have been limited resources. However, if complaints have been submitted, we do have bylaw enforcement officers that would investigate the matters. I think, as I've said repeatedly at council meetings, enforcing the interior use of buildings is extremely problematic. We're not permitted access to the interior buildings unless we have permission to do so. And that poses, again, significant difficulties to prove a use when a complaint is submitted. I can assure you that no building permits are issued or final inspections granted if kitchens or living spaces are included in the interior of boathouses. I'm likely fairly confident that those types of uses or finishes are being put in after the fact, after inspections have concluded. With respect to the Ministry of Natural Resources and those comments, yes, any use over water that is habitable, that's not marine storage, does require either ownership of the lake bed or a lease from the Crown. And while that could be pursued by the Crown to prevent some situations, my understanding is they've always either sold that lake bed or issued the land use permit. So I don't think it's going to be a tool that would ultimately prevent it. I think that's a fairly standard process for every two-story boathouse, for example, in the township. What I would point out, again, I think may be helpful for those new councillors, staff quite a few years ago now, thinking about 3-4 years ago, brought a report to council, identified that we are witnessing a number of building permits for boathouses that lack slips in the first story. They comply completely with the zoning bylaw. The building permit applications state marine storage, and the chief building official is obligated to issue them because the zoning bylaw allows that use. However, staff, again, have identified we're not naive. We know what's likely occurring in these buildings once building staff leave the site. And we suggested to council a number of options to try to address that issue, whether that's requiring open slips or open water in the first story of boathouses, or other types of controls on their size and use within, so that instead of trying to gain access to the interior buildings or catching people on weekends habitating inside, that we could control the issue at the source and the issuance of the building permit itself by requiring certain types of boathouse and dock designs. Council continues to deliberate on that issue. Staff have yet to receive any clear direction on changing the bylaws to address it. But I would note through the recent official plan review, policies were added to the official plan that do contemplate a small recreational area space within the first story boathouse as being permitted. I think that's somewhat pertinent to the current application at hand, as I think what we're debating is a relatively small area of the overall boathouse that may be used for recreational space. The previous term of council did include that policy in the adopted official plan. So future changes to the zoning bylaw will be forthcoming in that regard. And lastly, staff will be eventually coming back to this term of council with that broader issue, as again, it's been outstanding for a number of years now, and staff hopefully will again work with council to make those changes to the zoning bylaw to address this concern. I feel like we've had this conversation on a number of occasions for those returning councillors, I'm sure you recall, and we hope to finally tackle it in this term of council through the zoning bylaw review. So I hope that background and context is helpful and available to answer any further questions on the issue if council has. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Kent, your hand is up.
So just to be clear, Director Pink, a fridge is not permitted in a boathouse, even if it's got habitable recreation space. So therefore, if they're pulling drinks out of the main floor room there and drinking on the dock, the only recourse is for the neighbors to send a complaint in and to have Mr. Kennedy and his staff go out there to check both. I mean, he can't even go inside and check the refrigerator that is cooling the beers. I don't mean to be technical, but I understand there's no allowance for electrical equipment like a refrigerator on the main floor.
So again, through your worship, just to be clear, the zoning bylaw permits the use of boats and marine storage in the first story of a boathouse. No other permitted uses other than a small washroom, sauna, and mechanical room. So if any ratepayer, any councillor sees a boathouse that is used for a different purpose, they can advise Mr. Kennedy or bylaw enforcement staff, submit an online complaint, and we will do our best to investigate that matter and visit the property. And if we have evidence that a different use of the building is being used, we'll advise the owner that that must cease. I think therein lies the difficulty in one, either witnessing that activity, or two, in my experience, when we do witness the activity, it repeats after we leave. They may cease for that time being, but when we return, lines may be done up or we're no longer permitted access into the building to witness any activity. And that's why, again, I would suggest that the better control, rather than continue to chase this issue, is to look at the definition of a boathouse, the permissions for dock and boathouse construction in the zoning bylaw to better control the design and construction of the buildings.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let me read a resolution. That one? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to, I didn't want to leave David's comments hanging. I want to request that we bring this back to planning to further this conversation about what we want to expect out of our first story boathouses.
Mr. Pink.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree with that. I think, to refresh my memory exactly where it was left off, but that, again, staff did bring a number of reports on the issue, and I believe it's still outstanding. So we do hope we'll work with Mr. Sharp on bringing that back in the relatively new term. I think the other thing that's important to note too, and this speaks to the bylaw enforcement matter, historically, we've only had the resources to really act on a reactive basis to complaints. We receive a large number of complaints throughout the year, and we're staffed really to investigate those complaints. But my goal is, and hopefully this summer possibly, to increase the proactiveness of our enforcement activity, perhaps be on the water, so that we don't have to rely on complaints from neighboring property owners that the use is occurring. So that is a goal, it is a hope, but it is, again, time and resource permitting, and it is in the policy and procedure manual to consider proactive enforcement as those resources permit. So I hope that provides some assistance or assurance that doesn't entirely rely on neighborly complaints. We will do our best.
Thank you, Director Pink. Appreciate that. All right, we have a resolution moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved, the Township Council amend bylaw 2022-144 bracket Hickey bracket. And this amendment is minor in nature and does not require further public circulation.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
They're not-
I got them out of order.
Yeah, I got
I'll
them.
do this first.
It's
Never
my
mind, sorry.
fault.
All right, this one's moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-144 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 bracket Hickey, comma, roll number 4-7-031 bracket be ready first and second time. Any comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? All right, I'll ask all opposed. You got that? 3.
6-4.
6-4, that carries 6-4. Thank you.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I saw too. Okay, is that all I need?
No, then we need to do minor amendments.
Minor amendments we
There are
have.
none. Okay, then we'll read the third reading.
Third reading we have. All right, this is the third reading, moved by Councillor Bosenworth, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved, the bylaw 2022-144 bracket Hickey bracket be read a third time and finally passed. Any questions, any comments? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 3, I see.
Let's see, 4.
Oh, 4. I don't see the 4. Oh, yeah, 4 down here. Yes. Okay, that carries. Thank you.
So there we go.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Should we take a break?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably take a break. Let's just, looks like it's about 2 minutes after 3. Can we be back in 10 minutes? Is that enough time? Yeah. 10 minutes, 10 after 3. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think it's 12 minutes after 3. Okay, now you can hear me. We've got our quorum back, so I'm going to propose, sorry, what's going on with Gord Roberts?
He was doing that before. It's quite like a pocket.
Yeah.
Technically, that's called a disco.
Yeah.
It's you guys got to get with the times. I can't figure this out. I will, sorry.
Yeah, well, we're being taped, so I won't say what I'm thinking, but okay, we're going to go back to and roll in order so that we don't wind up missing things. The bylaws under section 9A1 is the first one, and Chriselle, I think you have that one. So we're going to invite Chriselle to join us in, there she is, and walk us through this report. Before you do anything, how do I do the volume?
Right, see where the speaker is.
Oh, yeah.
Click there. 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 Yep. That's done. Oh, fun.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry.
And good afternoon, Council.
Oh, just
There
leave
you
it.
go.
Bylaw 2022-203 is for the purposes of stopping up, closing, and conveying an original shore road allowance on Severn River. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, anybody have any questions, comments? Questions first, we'll start. I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth, that the original shore road allowance on Severn River lying in front of concession 20, part lot 21, bracket wood, bracket, designated as part 1 on plan 35R-26892-Sahat-Bakish, roll 8-16-072 be declared as surplus land, and that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of the said property pursuant to sections 8, 9, and 11 of the Municipal Act 2001, and further that bylaw 2022-203 to stop up, close, and convey that portion of original shore road allowance designated as part 1 on 35R-26892 be given 3 readings and passed. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity to basically let council know we have constituents down in this area.
Yeah.
You can't get through Muskoka Lakes, but it is an important area, and we represented them well, I would say, in the past years. And I just realized that others may not actually be aware of this. So thank you.
Good feedback. Thank you. All right, I'll call a question. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, then that carries. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You want me to keep all yours?
I gotta get some.
There goes Gord again.
God.
This is the next one.
Yep, 9A2.
Yeah, 9A2 again, Chriselle, please. Yeah, I know. There you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw 2023-005 is for the purposes of stopping up, closing, and conveying an original road allowance to an abutting landowner. This application was previously approved by General Finance Committee in September 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll read the resolution and then we can have a discussion if we need. Moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that the original shore road allowance on Lake Joseph, lying between concessions 12 and 13, part lot 18, Medora, designated as part 1 on plan 35R-26945-Luker-roll 4-19-01901, be declared as surplus land. and that the clerk is hereby instructed to dispose of the said property pursuant to sections 8, 9, and 11 of the Municipal Act, and further that bylaw 2023-005 to stop up, close, and convey that portion of original shore road allowance designated as Part 1 on 35R-26945 be given 3 readings and passed. Any comment, any discussion on that? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? No opposition, then that carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Next one is, oh, you gotta get a pen that works here. Next one is 9A3. I'm sorry?
The manager of planning. I believe.
Oh, manager of planning. Is that who's doing this? I don't see. Am I missing something?
Are we just reading it, perhaps?
Am I just going to read this one? No, no comment necessary. All right, we'll start with that. Okay, moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-199, being a bylaw to require mandatory pre-consultation for certain planning applications, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed. Anybody with any questions on that? I don't. Oh, Councillor Nishikawa, is that your hand up? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I just had. I'm just not quite sure. I guess I don't understand the fee schedule for this pre-consultation and when it would be required. So I'm guessing it's a much more complex application.
I'm going to ask Mr. Sharp.
Or like what I wouldn't want to be seeing is that the general, you know, the guy that wants to put an addition on his cottage or home should be able to get some basic information from our planning department. I would hope we wouldn't be charging them an additional cost to have those conversations.
Mr. Sharp?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your question, Councillor Nishikawa. So yes, before you is a pre-consultation bylaw. There is no fee required for the bylaw or for a pre-consultation to occur at this time. And under the Planning Act, we only actually have authority to require pre-consultations for certain types of applications. For example, you know, an official plan amendment, which would typically be a larger ask, a zoning bylaw amendment application. Consents and minor variances would not be subject to that process. However, you know, staff would obviously recommend to any applicants submitting any type of application to pre-consult with staff, or recommend that it occur, just because I find that it can expedite the process and eliminate quite a few uncertainties along the way. So hopefully that answers your question, but I'm happy to elaborate if needed. And I see that Mr. Pink has his screen on as well.
Yeah, Mr. Pink, you've joined us. Welcome back.
Thank you, Richard. I just thought I would clarify, perhaps there's some confusion. The later bylaw on the agenda is an amendment to the fee bylaw. That stems from changes from Bill 23 and that report in December, not the pre-consultation bylaw. It's not proposed to currently charge fees for pre-consultation. So it's a separate matter that that bylaw is on the agenda.
That's number 6.
Yeah, it's number 6 coming up in a few, but thank you for that. Okay, I have read this resolution. Any more questions? I see none. Then I'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed? No, I don't see any. That carries. Councillor Bosenworth, what is the word?
The gremlin was added again.
Okay. It's not as bad as Councillor Roberts' gremlin. That's good. Thank you.
Extra two from Treasury.
All right, the next two are from Treasury. And I don't know if there's a pitch to come with, if we have anybody who wants to speak to them.
They're standard, typical.
But they're standard, you're right, these are annual renewals, so we'll just start with the first one. Moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved that bylaw 2023-003, being a bylaw to authorize the levy and collection of interim taxes on all properties and property classes, to establish the dates for payment of taxes, and to provide for the charge of penalties and interest for the non-payment of same, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed. Any comment? All in favor? All right, anybody opposed? I think that was unanimous, but anyone opposed? No? I don't see anybody opposed. Thank you, that carries. One more, similarly, it's an annual renewal. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth. Be it resolved that bylaw 2023-004, being a bylaw to borrow, if necessary, to meet current expenditures for the 2023 for the Corporation of the Township of Muskoka Lakes, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed. Anyone with any feedback or comment on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Thank you. Okay, now we're on the aforementioned fee schedule amendment. And I don't know that we have a discussion on this one. I think the report sorted it out for us, but and was discussed at planning is correct. So moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burry, be it resolved that bylaw 2023-006, being a bylaw to amend Schedule F of consolidated fees and charges, bylaw 2022-152, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed. Just 1 second before we do that, please.
The consolidated fees and charges bylaw
Oh,
is
I'm sorry.
222.
Okay, so it is as I read it. It's correct. Anybody with any questions, comments? Councillor Bosenworth. You can't hear you. You're on mute, Rob.
All right, the ahead of the schedule says effective April 13th, 2022. Is that correct, or should it be something for 23?
It would be effective at the passing of the bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly, I don't know if we can do it retroactively. I doubt that. It would probably not be effective until the bylaw is passed. I don't know better or different. Don't know why that date's on there.
It's probably from when the original bylaw was passed, because the rest of the things on the schedule would have been effective that date.
So it's an amendment to
my
that
guess.
schedule
Yeah,
from
it's like we're
2022.
amending that schedule.
Okay, did you hear? I don't know if you could hear that discussion, but it amends the 2022 schedule. Okay, any other questions? All in favor? And anyone opposed? No, that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to zoning bylaws. Are we? Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Zoning bylaws. I think Mr. Fahner is back in the waiting room, and I suspect he's on this next one.
We should have staff first.
Oh, okay, we'll admit him after. Okay.
Or he can come in, but staff
Yeah.
should. Okay, so then just staff.
What does that mean?
Would be Mr. Yeah, I know he's in there.
He's on my thing says he's in
Sometimes
the
he
waiting
doesn't.
room. Oh. So he could be from before.
Or he-
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I'm going to ask Mr. Soya to take this up with us, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. In December, Planning Committee recommended approval of zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 3422, Lang, subject to the approval of a minor amendment to the draft bylaw. And the subject property is located within the community of Windermere. The purpose and effect of the application is to permit an oversized accessory secondary dwelling unit and the draft bylaw includes exemptions to permit a secondary dwelling unit on the property, also to exceed the maximum permitted gross floor area of the secondary dwelling unit, and to exceed the maximum permitted accessory building height. After circulation of the public notice and bylaw, staff noted that the proposed secondary dwelling unit also requires an exemption from section 3.45 of the comprehensive zoning bylaw. This section limits habitable buildings to a dwelling and a sleeping cabin, and the exemption would permit the secondary dwelling unit as a third habitable building on the subject property. This additional exemption was considered in the township staff report and also was considered by planning committee in the recommendation for approval. And therefore, to ensure all necessary relief is provided to facilitate this proposed construction, a minor amendment is provide relief from this section 3.45 of the zoning bylaw is recommended in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Okay, there are three resolutions. We'll take them one at a time. The first one is moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-139 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 bracket Lang roll number 3-2-015 bracket be read a first and second time. Anybody have any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Next is the amendment that Mr. Soya mentioned. It's moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved, the Township Council amends bylaw 2022-139 bracket Lang bracket. And this amendment is minor in nature and does not require further public circulation and is hereby approved prior to third reading. This amendment shall consist of an exemption from section 3.45 of the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw to permit an accessory secondary dwelling unit on a lot where only a dwelling unit and sleeping cabin are permitted. Any questions? Call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. And then finally is the third reading, moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-139 Lang be read a third time and finally passed. Any questions? Call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries as well. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to B2. Is it 6B2? 9B2. 9B2. Muskoka Road 169 Bala LTD. Mr. Sawyer, you're up again.
Thank you, Your Worship. In December, Planning Committee recommended approval of zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 3622 in the name of 3007 Muskoka Road 169 Bala Limited, subject to the approval of minor amendments to the draft bylaw. The purpose of this application is to repeal existing site-specific bylaws, to recognize existing residential, then also to recognize existing residential and retail uses within the new bylaw, and to permit the conversion of 3 commercial units into 6 additional apartment units. And the first recommended minor amendment is to restrict the number of residential units to the 5 existing units and the 6 proposed for a total of 11 units. And the second minor amendment is to make a correction to the township's zoning schedules. The zone mapping shows a small portion of the subject property within the community residential waterfront R4 zone. This zone is intended for lots that front on a water body, which the subject property does not. In 2001, the abutting property, which has frontage on Long Lake and is zoned R4, was severed from the subject property, and it appears that zoning at the time was intended to follow the resultant lot lines. To now align the zoning as intended with the existing lot lines, a minor amendment is recommended to rezone this small portion from R4 to community commercial highway C4 to match the remainder of the subject property. And Planning Committee had also recommended a minor amendment to establish minimum floor areas for apartment dwelling units in accordance with the Ontario Building Code minimums. And since then, staff have discussed this amendment with the township's chief building official, and it was determined that adding these specifics into zoning bylaw would be redundant, as the Ontario Building Code would already automatically apply. So given this redundancy, I believe that the resolution before council today, that this minor amendment has been removed. But of course, it's up to the council to ultimately remove it, but it does not appear to be necessary in this case. And that's my comments. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead with the first resolution. We're going to have a quick look and make sure the minor amendment has been amended the way you've proposed. It's being done now. All right, first one is moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-142 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 bracket 3007 Muskoka Road 169 Bala Ltd, roll number 7-4-031-02, be read a first and second time. I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? No one carries. Thank you very much. This is now correct?
Yep.
Good, thank you both. Okay, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved, the Township Council amend bylaw 2022-142, bracket 3007 Muskoka Road 169 Bala Ltd. And these amendments are minor in nature and do not require further public circulation and are hereby approved prior to third reading. These amendments shall consist of, first, restricting the number of apartment dwelling units to a maximum of 11, and second, rezoning of a portion of the subject property zoned community residential waterfront R4 to community commercial highway C4. All those in favor? And does anyone oppose? No opposed. That carries. Thank you. Okay, last one. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-142, 3007 Muskoka Road 169 Bala Limited or LTD, sorry, be read a third time and finally passed. Any questions? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That one carries as well. Thank you very much. Okay, we're rolling here. We got 2 left, right? Okay. Number 3, Castellaran. Is anybody coming on to that one? No? We're just going to read this one?
Sorry, Mayor Kelley.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Kelley. In December, Planning Committee heard zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 3722ML, bylaw 2022-143 in the name of Castellaran. The subject property is known municipally as 1133 Innisfree Road. The purpose of zoning bylaw 2022-143 is to provide an exemption from the minimum required front yard setback to construct a 6,325 square foot sports court. The minimum permitted setback is 200 feet and the requested setback is 67 feet at the closest point. In December, Planning Committee recommended the denial of the application to Council. No new submissions were received after the December Planning Committee meeting. I have no further comments, but would be happy to assist Council with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crowder. Anyone have any questions? This one was denied, so we're at planning. And so is this framed in the positive or the negative?
Positive, always positive.
Okay, always in the positive. All right. Moved by Councillor Mazan, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-143 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 bracket Castellaran roll number 6-19-033 close bracket be read a first and second time. Want to make sure we're doing this right. We vote positive for this. We're vetoing.
It would go to third reading,
Yeah.
or
Okay.
you can, if you don't, then it stops here.
This-
If it's defeated after 2 readings, then it stops. If it's carried, it goes to third reading.
But this comes to us having been defeated at planning.
That's correct.
So, okay. Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I remember at some point in my council days that you had to give a reason why you were doing this, but essentially going through some of the discussions from the building department and the concerns about the septic system is why I would be defeating this application.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to vote on it first, but anyone with any other comments or questions? No, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of approving this, raise your hand, please. And everyone who opposes, please raise your hand. And that is defeated. Thank you very much. I'll give you this, and there's no third reading on a defeat. There you go. And do we need reasons? We need reasons, and no. Okay. Apparently we don't need reasons on this one, but we've heard one already. That's good. Okay, this I think is the last item for the agenda. We've already done number 4 with Hickey, so we're on Heller. And Ms. Crowder's back. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kelley. In December, Planning Committee heard zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 4222 ML, bylaw 2022-154 in the name of Heller. The subject property is known municipally as 14 Horseshoe Island. The purpose of zoning bylaw 2022-154 is to fulfill a condition of consent application B11221 ML by restricting cumulative dock width to a maximum of 50 feet. In December, Planning Committee recommended the approval of the application to Council. No new submissions were received after the December Planning Committee meeting. I have no further comments, but would be happy to assist Council with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone with questions? I'll read the resolution. The first one, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-154 to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 2014-14 bracket Heller roll number 4-22-066-03 be read a first and second time. Anybody with questions? I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That one carries. And we just, oh, there's no minor amendment. Okay. Then the last one is moved by Councillor Nishikawa, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-154 bracket Heller be read a third time and finally passed. Anybody with a comment or a question? I'll call the question right now. All in favor? Anybody opposed? That carries as well. Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, I forgot. We have closed. Yeah. I was about ready to go home.
Getting excited.
All right. We will be removing ourselves from here into closed. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Zabit, seconded by Councillor Bosenworth. Be it resolved that Council in closed session convene at 4:42 p.m.
3:41.
What? Oh yeah, 3:41. 3:41 p.m. Sorry, damn digital clock. For litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, one matter, and labor relations or employee negotiations, one matter, and personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, one matter, and pursuant to Section 239, subsection 2, Section 239, subsection 2 of the Municipal Act 2001. All in favor? So we're going to go into closed. We'll unplug everything. Thank you for those of you who are leaving for your assistance today. Appreciate it. Take a 5-minute break. We'll take a 5-minute break and reconvene in 3:47.
Gordon looks like Flash Gordon there.
I know. That looks painful.
So Gord's got a hockey playing background. So hockey players always give other hockey players nicknames. From here on, it's Disco